Think about those days at work when you felt truly valued, like, your team really had your back no matter what.
Hmm.
Now, contrast that with times you felt like you were constantly under a microscope, your every move questioned.
Yeah, not a good feeling.
Right. What's the secret sauce that makes some workplaces feel like a band of trusted allies, all rowing in the same direction, while others, well, they're just breeding grounds for frustration, people counting down the minutes? Okay, let's unpack this.
It really boils down to a fundamental human need, doesn't it? For security, for a sense of belonging, and that absolutely extends to our professional lives.
Definitely.
When that underlying need isn't met at work, it creates ripples. It affects everything from an individual's well-being right up to the entire organization's performance.
Exactly. And that's precisely the territory we're exploring today. We've got a rich vein of ideas to mine from Simon Sinek's Leaders Eat Last.
A really insightful book.
It is. We're talking powerful real world stories, some research that might just surprise you, and examples that'll likely have you looking at your own workplace dynamics in a whole new light.
Hmm.
Our goal, learner, is to distill the essential elements, the things that explain how trust, cooperation, and real leadership take root and flourish or, wither.
Right.
We want to arm you with knowledge you can actually use and maybe shift your perspective a bit without just drowning you in detail.
And Sinek introduces this really compelling idea, the circle of safety, as a key factor in whether people and organizations thrive. Maybe you could elaborate on what that actually entails.
Absolutely. The circle of safety. It's essentially about creating an environment where people feel shielded from threats and not just physical dangers,
Or
right?
for internal stuff, too.
Exactly. Those internal anxieties, the office politics, that feeling of being vulnerable. When that circle is strong, when it's resilient, trust just naturally flourishes among the people inside it. And this is where things get really interesting. Sinek shares this gripping story about a pilot in Afghanistan. His call sign was Johnny Bravo.
Oh,
This is back in 2002, and his aircraft had, well, pretty basic avionics. And get this, he was navigating with outdated Soviet-era maps.
wow. Talk about high pressure.
Seriously. That paints a vivid picture of the huge challenges he was facing. It wasn't just about his technical flying skill.
No, it sounds like much more was at play.
Not at all. What fueled his courage, to fly into uncertain territory, sometimes with the very real possibility of not returning, it wasn't just his training or the tech.
So what was it?
He puts it down to a deep sense of empathy for the troops on the ground. He famously said, and this really sticks with you, there are fates worse than death.
Hmm.
One fate worse than death is accidentally killing your own men. Another fate worse than death is going home alive when 22 others don't.
Wow. That's incredibly powerful. It speaks to a motivation way beyond just duty or personal gain. It's about connection.
Totally. So, when a strong circle of safety exists, what's the impact?
Yeah, what does that look like in practice?
Well, precisely because of that deep sense of responsibility and mutual care that they would have done it for me, feeling you see this powerful, natural cooperation emerge. And a real sense of pride, too.
Yeah.
People aren't just going through the motions because they have to. They're
Yeah.
genuinely invested. They want to work for each other. The whole dynamic shifts from obligation to, well, something you want to do, a place you feel supported.
That transformation from just obligation to genuine care and shared purpose, that's really the engine of true collaboration and commitment, isn't it?
It really is.
And Sinek illustrates the stark contrast, the consequences of a broken circle of safety with another example, doesn't he? The Bob Chapman story at Hasten Sandiaker.
Exactly. Bob Chapman, when he took over as the new CEO, he made a point of really immersing himself in the culture, seeing it firsthand.
Smart move.
Yeah, he spent time on the factory floor just observing. And what he saw in the cafeteria one morning, back in March '97, was really revealing. He noticed this stark, kind of unsettling difference in how office staff and factory workers were treated.
Could you maybe detail some of those differences? It really highlights how easily trust can just fracture.
Oh, it was jarring. They literally had separate entrances to the building.
Seriously.
Yeah. Office staff could take breaks when needed, grab coffee. But the factory workers, rigidly timed breaks, dictated by a bell.
Wow.
And here's another one. If an office employee needed to make a personal call, just use their desk phone. But a factory worker had to get permission to use a payphone.
Oh, come on.
It sent this really clear, though unspoken message. The company basically didn't trust the factory workers. Just because of their role and where they work, they felt like a different, less valued tier.
That kind of blatant difference just eats away at any feeling of shared identity or purpose. It creates that us versus them thing, which is so damaging.
Oh.
And sadly, as Sanic points out, this feeling of dissatisfaction isn't just unique to Hays and Sandiager, is it?
Not at all. He brings in data from the Deloitte Shift Index, which found that an astonishing 80% of people report being dissatisfied with their jobs.
80%. That's huge.
Think about that. Truly inspired, fulfilled employees, they're the exception. And when most of your workforce isn't engaged or happy, well, any real progress becomes an uphill battle.
It really makes you question the systems we've built, They often seem to go against our basic human nature because biologically, we're wired for cooperation, aren't we?
Precisely. Think back to early human societies, maybe groups of around 150 people. Everyone knew each other. Trust was everything for survival.
Right, hunting together, raising kids, caring for the sick.
All of it depended on mutual support. Cynic even mentions that in those communities, treason was often punishable like murder. That just shows how vital trust was for the group to survive.
Yeah, cooperation against outside threats was always going to work better than fighting amongst themselves.
Exactly. Far more effective.
So our biology kind of pushes us towards forming these circles of safety and cooperating. And this is where the neurochemicals come in, right? The brain chemistry stuff.
Okay, yeah, now we're getting to the really fascinating part. Let's dive into the chemical signals that influence our social interactions. First up, endorphins.
Okay.
Think about that feeling after a good workout, that sense of well-being. Endorphins reward physical effort. Going back to our ancestors, they'd flood the system after a successful hunt or gathering food. It made the hard work feel good, so we'd do it again.
Creates a positive loop.
Right. Nowadays, exercise, manual labor, that's what triggers them for most of us.
Right, that feeling of accomplishment, maybe a bit of relief. Okay, and then there's dopamine. What's its role?
Dopamine is the driver for achieving goals, making progress. It's that little satisfaction hit when you finish something, tick an item off your list.
Like finishing a project.
Exactly. It motivates us to finish school, chase ambitions, hit targets. But, and this is crucial, dopamine is also highly addictive. Think social media notifications, likes on a post, even performance bonuses at work. They all trigger dopamine.
Right, those little rewards.
The danger is environments that get too hooked on dopamine rewards can end up fostering a make the numbers at all costs mentality. People first, number second can get flipped.
Yeah, that short-term reward thing can overshadow the long-term impact on people and the culture, can it? What about serotonin? How does that fit in?
Serotonin. That's linked to feelings of pride, status within the group. It's that warm feeling when someone you care about succeeds or when you feel you've made your leaders proud.
Okay, so it reinforces group well-being.
Exactly. It reinforces behaviors that help the group and fosters respect for leaders. Sinek uses the example of running a marathon. Beyond personal achievement, knowing your friends and family are cheering, wanting to make them proud, that's serotonin kicking in, giving you that extra push.
So it fosters those give-and-take relationships, care, respect, wanting to contribute. Got it. And finally, oxytocin, often called the love hormone or trust molecule.
Oxytocin is all about fostering those deep bonds. Love, trust, connection, that feeling of warmth, security you get from close relationships. Cynic shares a simple story. A friend drops his gloves, a stranger picks them up. That small act gives both people a boost of oxytocin.
Nice.
And get this, even just witnessing an act like that can inspire others to be more generous. It's the brain chemistry behind paying it forward. The more kindness we see or experience, the more we're wired to do the same.
It's a really powerful, positive cycle. But what happens in environments where that circle of safety is weak or just not there?
Well, that's where cortisol, the stress hormone, jumps in. And crucially, cortisol actually inhibits oxytocin release.
Okay, so stress blocks trust.
Pretty much. In workplaces full of politics, lack of transparency, no trust, we become more self-focused, more protective of ourselves, less worried about others.
Makes sense.
Cynic also cites this study from University College London linking chronic lack of recognition at work to a significantly higher risk of heart disease, probably due to that constant feeling of being undervalued, plus the high stress levels.
So a toxic work environment isn't just unpleasant. It can literally harm your physical health.
Yeah.
That connects to the idea of abstraction in decision-making, doesn't it? Being removed from the human impact.
Absolutely. Sinek brings up the famous Milgram experiment.
Oh yeah, the shock experiment.
Right. When people couldn't see the person they were supposedly shocking, a scary high percentage were willing to inflict harm just because they were following orders.
Telling.
And he draws a direct line to the modern business world. Leaders operating mainly through spreadsheets, financial reports, they can become disconnected from the real human consequences of their decisions.
It's a worrying thought, isn't it?
Mm.
The potential for leaders in big companies to make huge decisions without really grappling with the impact on actual people's lives.
It is. And Sinek argues, to fight this abstraction, we need something higher than just the bottom line, a noble purpose, a moral code, something to guide decisions and keep us connected to the human side.
So the focus shouldn't just be profit, but a deeper sense of purpose and responsibility to the people involved. This erosion of trust. It's not exactly new, is it? Sinek talks about some historical shifts.
That's right. He contrasts the incredible unity and sense of service in America during World War II. Over 90% supported the war effort with shifts later on.
Like with different generations.
Yeah, he talks about the boomer generation, mostly growing up in relative prosperity. Sinek suggests this might have, for some, led to more focus on individual achievement compared to the greatest generation, who were shaped by shared hardship and sacrifice.
That potential shift in values probably trickled down into workplace norms too.
No doubt. And Sinek points to a really significant moment in 1981. President Reagan firing the striking air traffic controllers.
Right. Pat CO.
Now, setting aside the politics of it, Sinek argues it unintentionally sent a powerful message to business leaders everywhere. Mass layoffs were now sort of an acceptable tool for economic reasons.
Okay.
It arguably signaled a shift, maybe prioritizing commerce over employee security in some ways.
That set a precedent, didn't it? Moving away from that older idea of job security and mutual loyalty.
Exactly. Layoffs became more common, less of a last resort. And the irony, Sinek points out, is that in chasing progress and efficiency, we've kind of built a world where real deep cooperation is harder. You see evidence, he argues, in the booming self-help industry. It's trying to fix problems our modern structures might have actually created.
Like we're treating symptoms of a system problem.
Yeah.
And in today's digital age, Sinek also raises concerns about virtual interaction and building real trust.
He does. While social media connects us in some ways, Sinek argues it's just not as effective as real face-to-face contact for building strong, trusting relationships.
Yeah, you miss a lot online.
He uses the example of Blog World conferences. Even though these are people deep in the online world, thousands still travel to meet in person. Because nothing really replaces that direct human interaction. It fosters belonging, understanding. It's often where real innovation sparks. Even remote teams can miss the subtle social cues that build deep cohesion.
It's that shared physical space, the nonverbal stuff, the unplanned chats.
Yeah.
That's where connections really form.
Exactly. And Sinek worries about the long-term effects of replacing too much real interaction with virtual stuff. He draws a parallel to the delayed consequences of those 80s and 90s policy shifts.
Interesting parallel.
He also brings up Dunbar's number, the idea we can only really maintain about 150 close relationships.
Right.
In bigger, less tight-knit workplaces, people often build their closest friendships outside work because those strong internal bonds are just harder to form. He tells a story about a social media company's open plan office meant to boost communication, but maybe hindering deeper connections.
So, lots of connections online doesn't equal deep trust in our daily lives. This leads to the importance of seeing the impact of our work, right?
This is a really powerful point he makes. He shares Adam Grant's study with university fundraisers.
Oh, yeah, I know this one.
A super brief, 5-minute visit from a student who actually got a scholarship funded by their work. It led to a dramatic, sustained jump in the fundraiser's performance.
Amazing.
Just seeing the tangible impact, understanding the real why behind the calls was way more motivating than just looking at targets on a spreadsheet.
It taps into that fundamental human need to feel like we matter, like we're making a real difference.
Exactly. Sinek contrasts this with staring at spreadsheets. We might be told to feel connected to numbers, but our innate drive to invest time and energy is rooted in feelings for people.
Right.
Time and effort, Sinek says, have this almost absolute value in human interaction. Leaders who genuinely give their time and energy, they're the ones who are really valued and trusted.
So that genuine care and time investment from leaders speaks volumes, builds that crucial trust.
Right.
Sinek then looks at examples where culture gets eroded when it becomes all about profit,
Okay,
right?
he talks about Greg Smith's famous resignation letter from Goldman Sachs.
Yeah, that made waves.
Smith basically lamented the loss of a culture built on client trust and pride, which he saw being replaced by just making money, short term.
Hmm.
And then there's that stark story about the new managing director at Citi who's told his team straight up, I only care about revenue, net income, expenses. I'm not here to mentor you.
Wow, that's blunt.
As Sinek puts it, so goes the leadership, so goes the culture.
Those are really sobering examples of how a purely transactional approach can just kill a positive culture. But it's not all doom and gloom, right? There are positive examples too.
Absolutely. Sinek contrasts those with the positive culture at 3M, their long history of encouraging idea sharing and letting employees pursue projects, famously led to Post-it notes.
Right, the classic innovation story.
It's a great illustration of how trust, open communication, empowering people that fosters incredible innovation, unexpected breakthroughs.
So building that circle of safety and trust isn't just about morale. It actually drives creativity and progress. Now, let's pivot to leadership itself. What does Sinek say really marks a true leader versus just a manager or worse?
Sinek draws a really clear line. True leadership, he argues, is about self-sacrifice for the group, prioritizing the well-being of the people you lead.
Okay.
Tyranny, on the other hand, is all about the leader preserving their own wealth, power, status, often hurting the people they lead. He uses Saddam Hussein as an example of a leader so focused on himself, he isolated himself and harmed his own organization.
That self-serving focus creates fear and paranoia, undermining everything a real leader should be building. And at the heart of real leadership is integrity.
Absolutely critical. Sinek introduces the foxhole test from the Marine Corps OCS.
The foxhole test.
Yeah. It stresses that integrity, honesty are way more important for leadership than always being right. He tells the story. A Marine recruit falls asleep on watch, immediately owns up, another one tries to lie about a mistake. The honest one faces consequences but keeps respect. The liar, his leadership potential is shot. It shows leadership is about character, trustworthiness, not just rank.
That integrity is the bedrock of trust. And Sinek also touches on why we often distrust politicians, even if we agree with their policies sometimes.
Exactly. He suggests we often sense a lack of maybe genuine conviction or consistency. He uses Ron Paul as an example.
Okay.
Many disagreed strongly with his libertarian views, right? But he was often seen as more trustworthy than some others because he consistently said what he believed, even when unpopular.
That unwavering stance, even if you disagree, builds a kind of trust.
Right. That integrity. And ultimately, leaders set the tone. Hypocritical leaders create hypocritical cultures. He mentions the Ralph Lauren bribery scandal in Argentina as an example of that.
It all comes back to leading by example, top-down ethics. And Sinek also points out systemic pressures in politics that can erode trust.
He talks about the intense pressure, even for new members of Congress, to focus relentlessly on fundraising, often at the expense of engaging with constituents.
Right, the money chase.
That can lead to the perception, understandably, that they're more focused on donors than the people they represent. And the fact that congressional retreats, meant to foster some cooperation, were reportedly canceled due to lack of interest, that signals a real breakdown in connection and shared purpose.
Yeah, a fracturing of those basic bonds. Now, let's look at the consequences when profit really does trump people's well-being and safety.
Sinek details the Deepwater Horizon disaster, a tragic example of what happens when a drive for profit leads to cutting safety corners.
A terrible outcome.
And he provides a fascinating contrast. Jack Welch's leadership at GE, often about intense metrics, frequent layoffs, versus James Sinegal's people-first approach at Costco.
Very different philosophies. Welch's GE was known for tough performance reviews, layoffs as a tool. Senegal's Costco focused on employee well-being.
Exactly. Costco pays much higher wages, better benefits than competitors. Layoffs are an absolute last resort. Sinek quotes Senegal saying during the 2009 recession, talking about employees, we should be figuring out how to give them more, not less.
Wow, that really shows the difference in values.
It does, and Sinek argues powerfully. Customers will never truly love a company until the employees love it first. You have to protect those frontline folks.
It's that inside-out idea. Care for your people, and they'll care for your customers. This leads to the role of incentives in business today.
Sinek explains how modern business often overemphasizes those dopamine-releasing individual incentives,
Yeah.
bonuses, commissions, that sort of thing.
Right.
While they can motivate to a point, relying too heavily on them can actually undermine group cohesion, collaboration, shared purpose. When the focus is just on individual wins, usually just profit, it can overshadow caring for the people being served, customers, employees, whoever.
That relentless chase for more profit, more market share can have damaging results, not just inside companies, but economy-wide too.
He points to big events like the 1929 stock market crash and the repeal of Glass-Steagall, possibly contributing to the 2008 crisis, as examples of unchecked, profit-driven ambition going wrong.
Hmm.
He even draws an interesting parallel to destructive abundance in parenting. Trying to give kids everything might inadvertently lead to impatience, struggles with fulfillment, maybe fueled by dopamine overloads from social media and constant distraction.
Yeah, the constant stimulation seeking instant gratification can make it harder to value long-term rewards from service, relationships, real contribution. So, given all this, what's the path forward according to Sinek? How do we rebuild trust and cooperation?
Sinek uses a really compelling analogy. Step 12 of Alcoholics Anonymous, helping another alcoholic.
Okay, how did that apply?
He argues that genuine service to real colleagues contributing to their well-being is key to breaking that addictive cycle of purely dopamine-driven goals in organizations. Sponsoring someone in AA, for instance, taps into serotonin, wanting to live up to the mentor's belief in you, and oxytocin, the trust and care bond. These can fight addiction and build healthy cultures.
So it's about shifting focus from transactions back to genuine human connection and support.
Exactly. He concludes that organizations led with a focus on people, on building that strong circle of safety, like Charlie Kim's Next Jump, Bob Chapman's Barry Wehmiller, Senegal's Costco, often achieve far greater, more sustainable benefits in the long run than those just chasing profit.
Right.
He contrasts Welch's perhaps thrilling but unstable approach with Senegal's steady, resilient, people-focused model.
So building that foundation of trust and care isn't just nice. It has real, positive, long-term consequences for success.
Absolutely. So, Lerna, the core message through all this seems pretty clear. Building environments of trust, cooperation where people feel valued, safe, protected, that isn't just a nice to have.
No, it's fundamental.
It's a fundamental driver of resilience, innovation, and sustained success, whether at work or anywhere else.
Which really raises a vital question for you to think about.
Mm-hmm.
Considering these insights from Sinek, what's maybe one specific, even small change you could advocate for, or even just implement yourself in your own world, work, community, family, to foster more trust and psychological safety?
Mm.
And how might understanding these biological drivers, oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine, cortisol, how might that change the way you actually view leadership and teamwork in your own life?
Some incredibly powerful food for thought there. Thanks so much for taking this deep dive with us today. We really encourage you to keep exploring these fascinating and, frankly, crucial dynamics of human behavior in organizations and, well, everywhere.